Hi, Roy here on my channel Roy Reads Anything, where I talk about books, old books usually, that are strange or interesting or just weird. And one little series I'm doing is talking about occult detectives. So this week, I'm going to talk about a occult detective, probably a little bit more obscure, Sheila Crerar, whose adventures were written about by Ella M. Scrimsauer in 1920.
Right, nice.
It is. I don't know which is the. Well, I think Ella M. Scrimsauer is a great author name. I'm less sure about Sheila Crerar as a hero name. It's a little bit hard to say. It hasn't got any hard consonants in it. But Sheila Crerar, I think, is great. Where do you find her? Well, I think the only person her stories appeared in a magazine called The Blue Magazine, which was, like I say, 1920. Uh, Blue didn't have the connotations it used to have of being slightly pornographic. It was a general magazine aimed at a female readership. So there were romance stories, features like Types of Today, number one, The Flapper. Um, but there was these six Sheila Crerar stories appeared there. So Ella M. Scrimsauer, who went on to write nine books, I think, novels. There was a science fiction novel, a romance of reincarnation, and some regular type romances. But these stories, I think probably the only person who's actually got the magazines is Mike Ashley, who includes one of her stories in his Fighters of Fear anthology, which is probably pretty much every occult detective you could ever want in here. And they've also been collected in a couple of books. I'll get back to that. So Sheila Crerar, what's she like? Well, like I say, they're written in a for that kind of magazine. There's actually a romance subplot, but I like her because she's incredibly brave and dauntless, and it's kind of a not rags to riches, but it's kind of here's the first line of the first story. Sheila Crerar felt very lonely as she sat in her tiny sitting room in her dreary lodgings. She was tired too, mentally as well as physically, and she tried to forget the misery of the past 6 months. So she's an orphan, and when her uncle who's raised her passes away, she ends up in poverty, and she's psychic. She comes to London to try and sort of recover her economic independence. And there's some great scenes where she's in London. Her psychicness means she sees things from all different times, So she's sitting in a park and there's like people and stuff from ages gone by going past in her sight. And she decides to advertise her services as an occult detective. With this advert, lady of gentle birth, Scottish, young, penniless, possessing strong psychic powers, will devote her services to the solving of uncanny mysteries or the laying of ghosts. Offer quite genuine. Um, Reply with particulars and remuneration offered to SC, and it gives the address of her lodgings. So begins her career, laying ghosts, sort of sorting out occult incursions, and like I say, she's unusually fearless. So let's say a terrible misty vapor is manifesting itself in a room. A thin spiral column rose from floor to ceiling and writhed and twisted in serpentine coils. Sheila rushed towards it. So she goes straight in there to battle the strange mist. And even though it sort of lays her low, she does that again and again. Here's how she deals with the fact there's a werewolf roaming the grounds. And that night, as she stood at the garden gate after dinner and enjoyed the glory of a white earth under a full moon, she caught sight of a shadowy grey shape creeping among the trees. It was her first glimpse of the killer. Without a thought of fear, she bounded after it. Hatless, coatless, breathless, she followed it. It turned its head, its eyes gleamed viciously, and it snarled angrily. Sheila pulled a branch of whitethorn, a protection against witchcraft, and held it high above her head. The wolf leapt at her, but as it touched the tree, it whined, slunk around a corner, and when Sheila moved a second later, it had vanished from sight. So, yes, she will go towards the werewolf without even a hat and battle it with with the right equipment. Um, and yeah, they're fine. They're not perhaps the greatest, either the greatest detective stories or the greatest occult stories. But you know, she's a plucky female hero. Um, as one of the male characters says, "Oh, you modern women, you dabble in science and medicine, you dabble in politics and law, and now you dabble in the occult. What is there left for mere man?" But she's the one solving the crimes. I would hire her because she gets the job done. She's fearless. Yeah, doesn't insist on wearing a hat.
What hat would you actually wear?
I don't think it means she's got a special werewolf fighting hat. Just she's got no hat at all because it's 1920. People wouldn't be outside without hats.
Well, they used to sit inside with hats as well, didn't they, in olden times?
Quite possibly.
The 1950s.
Yeah, I think the let's not get hung up on the hatlessness aspect, although I did bring it up. Where can you find it? Well, Coach Whip Publications in one of their Supernatural Detective series, number 4. You can get all the Sheila Creerers and a fabulous novel, The Undying Monster, by Jesse Douglas Kerrish. So that's a good volume. Absolute book collecting headbangers will want to track down the Ash Tree Press 500 edition, limited to 500 copies edition with an introduction by Jack Adrian that came out in 2006. But for the rest of us, there's this. So good. One of the early-ish occult detectives. And also, if you're sort of plotting the occult detectives from when they start mainly in Victorian times through into the early 20th century, thinking, when do the women start appearing? Well, as a series character, with L.O.M. Scrimshour's Sheila Crerar is when the female occult detectives come along. So in 1920, again, what was it? First degrees awarded, first votes. It's a bumper year for the distaff side.
Been a little bit late.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But we'll pretend it was 1920.
Yeah, people haven't even got hats to fight werewolves, and they want the vote. One vaguely coherent thought I've had about occult detectives is there's a spectrum of the authors, from those for whom the idea of an occult detective or psychic investigator, as she is called, is simply a plot device. They think, oh, that's interesting. You know, like you could have a detective who is, I don't know, flies a plane or something. There's an occult detective. At the another end of the spectrum, you've got authors such as Dion Fortune, Aleister Crowley, who are like actual magical practitioners, which is puts things in a bit of a different perspective. And in the middle, you've got authors like Sax Rohmer, Dennis Wheatley, who are obsessed with, that they're really interested in occult lore, even though they might not be practicing themselves. So there's that kind of spectrum. Not saying that one end of the spectrum is necessarily better. I think being a master of the mystic arts might not make you a master of the writing arts, but it is a feature of the world of the occult detective to this very day that there'll be actual practitioners writing the stories as well as those who just think it's like an interesting little thing. So that's my occult detective for this week. I'm implying that I'm going to do them every week. I very much doubt that'll happen. So yeah, Sheila Crerar. Back soon with something else. Goodbye.